From India's tallest mural in Lodi colony to projects across Berlin, Kochi, she brings poetry to concrete spaces, a sense of calm between all the chaos. Let's put our hands together for Anpu. Santanu studied to become an engineer, then realized he's better artist. From sneakers, murals, album covers to NFTs, his work feels like an adrenaline rush. Precise yet unpredictable, he's also the first ever Red Bull World Doodle champion. Let's have a round of applause for Santanu Hazarika. Here is how an Olliday event goes. Round 1, each creator comes forward to share details about their art that hopefully no one else has known or seen it. Round 2, we get to spill the beans on their work and maybe a little bit more through a game of Jenga, which my man Iman will take you through with the rules. Round 3, after that we open the floor to questions and then head to the terrace and enjoy the evening. Welcome back to Olliday, everyone. Santanu, can you please, Anpu, can you please come on stage?
Hi, I'm Anpu. I've been doing large-scale public murals all across India for over a decade and a half. So it's been a long time doing different kinds of city walls and different kinds of cities. I put this up just to show you what it feels like to be in front of a wall. What does it mean to actually stand in front of a blank canvas? And I feel every city is different, every street is different. So the kind of creativity I'd like to bring towards each space changes depending on where I am. And that allows me to really push myself and realize that no streets are the same and you don't need to really have the same idea in the same space. And obviously, wanting to find out what I can create in different spaces is why I like painting on the streets. Just to show you, so there's a whole lot of difference. That's me at 4 and there's me 40 years later. But the me at 4 is what I am still now. And just having a childlike curiosity for a lot of things, and also when I was 4, I also realized that this idea of the world that we have, which is what is the gender role of a guy towards what is the gender role of a woman, they're also so skewed. And I didn't really fit to the norms of what a guy did or what a girl did, and I didn't know what was in between either. But I like to dress up as a boy and felt more confident that way, and climbing trees was a passion. And much later, when I studied art in an art school for over 6-7 years, I did my graduate and postgraduate in fine art painting, and I wanted to be a painter, a studio painter, you know, the kind that sort of sits and dabs in color and thinks about space, time, and whatever it is that people do in studios. And I imagined that was what my life was going to be. Until, let's say, about 15 years ago when I lived in Bremen for a bit. This is in the north of Germany. And I encountered a studio with 15 other artists who were creatives. There were graffiti writers, DJs, musicians, clowns. And for the first time in my life, I felt shunted. I felt really small because all I did was go to the studio and paint on a canvas. But these guys came back with a daily rush, a daily adrenaline rush. And I started looking at the streets for the first time. It's not like I did not see street art before, or it's not like I did not see the streets before. But now I started looking at the streets in terms of a language. People started tagging on walls. So I would say, okay, this is what you did, or this is what you're talking about. But they had this really effervescent enthusiasm, which I couldn't even imagine, or I couldn't even come up with that sort of an energy. I'm just drained in the studio, the sunless studio, just painting. And that kept me thinking about what it is that I want to do with my life. I did not pave this path. I did not choose to be a street artist. It's not a term I like or talk about. I did not wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm going to do this. This was the first mural I did. It's around literally 45 feet by 23 feet. Even I don't know how I did it. But this friend of mine said that she wanted to do this festival in Kidki. This is an area that she was worked in for a long time. And she said we could try and do an urban art festival. I was like, okay, I'm game for it. I had a 23-foot ladder. And of all the things that I want to paint, it was a hand. the most complex of things that you can even imagine. And I was like, yeah, I can do it. All I would do was climb up this ladder and draw one line. And then I would climb back the ladder and I would look at it and say, okay. I don't even know what okay means because nobody taught me how to paint on the streets. I do not have a precedent. Nobody was there to inform me. I self-educated while I was painting. It took me 7 days to do this. The snake was done by an Italian artist. He just came, he just took a stake, drew a random sketch, and he finished his work and he walked on while my hand and the wires were remaining. But what I remember the most was how happy I felt when I was up that 23-foot ladder. How free I felt, how grounded, how safe, how strong, how powerful. There were flies on the streets, there were mosquitoes. It was just a really rotten alley, but nothing bothered me. And we didn't have any funding then. Everybody just bought their own paints and put everything together, and everyone took a wall space they liked and they painted. It was very free and an open space, and I really liked it. I enjoyed it. Around that time, I did a lot of stencils as well. It was something that you could quickly do. And it was another way of just navigating and walking through these streets, asking people, can I paint this wall? Can I put a stencil here? And just having a language. I'm an introverted studio painter. I don't know what it is to walk on the streets and paint. I had to learn. It was a good learning for me because you really become humbled. You don't tell the story to an old person and a young person alike. You tell them differently, and you can tell whatever story you want. That is the beauty, because they're curious to listen, they're curious to hear, and it doesn't matter. So I felt I didn't even have to tell people what I'm doing. Either they got it or they don't, but it doesn't matter, but I can create stories. This was a wall I painted in Bangalore. This is called the Harvest Moon. It's a very nice intersection of a church, a temple, and a lot of goons. But, my life keeps giving back to me as much as I keep enjoying it. And this is why I put the picture of me sitting on a tree. That's my happiest, when I'm alone on a tree. Because as a kid, all I did was look up to a tree and say, I would like to climb there. But the joy I feel in painting large-scale murals is exactly that. But it took me so long to realize that. So many things that I had to do and unlearn and relearn and become something I didn't even realize I could become. People's perception of what it is that you need to see in a public space. I don't paint the entire being. It's not important. The action is important. But it's not something I would have sat back 5 years ago and thought, okay, this is the painting I want to do. It's like every painting leads you to understand your style of painting, your sentiment towards the space, and that allows you to try something else. So I've just been intuitively doing what I've been doing. It's not so planned as you imagine. I put this up for scale mainly. I hardly have photographs of me painting because I forget to take photographs. And for some times that I do have, that's me on a crane. And this was done for Indigo, and Indigo had commissioned me to do this girl power theme mural, and we painted this entire metro station, which is I think 24,000 square feet. It was a mammoth job. I spent 40 days in Gurugram in the winter painting, and it was hell. It was like I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, be at site at 6:30, and till 6 in the evening, till it's sundown, I'm there. And that for 40 days without a break. And even there were a couple of people who helped me with it, they wanted a break, and I'm so ruthless because I don't know how to not perform. So I'm like the bad example of what an artist should be. This is one of my favorite pieces that I did last year. This is right in the bang of Church Street, and if you've ever been to Church Street, you would know it is a hub for books and reading, and Blossoms and a lot of other bookshops have always been around this area. And even after painting this mural, the guy comes and says, "What is it about?" And so it's one thing you're thinking you're going to get the right visual image for a piece because it's a tall wall and you want a very fitting image. You ask your friend to model for you. Her parents take pictures for you. You want it to be right. You want it to be a South Indian woman. You want curly hair. You think you've got it all laid out. Until someone comes and asks you, what does this mean? A lot of sentiment that it holds is very powerful for me. So this is why I have that, and that is me there. And this is what I like doing. Sorry, I pointed out. But if you can see, it's hardly painted. You can also see I use the gray of the wall as an undertone. And again, coming back to when it fades, it will fade beautifully and it will look like it was always meant to be part of the wall. And this, again, is something you don't realize, like, say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, what you want to do on the streets. It comes with learning, of having been there and having realized, I don't need to tell you I can paint. I don't need for you to be amused or wowed about the way I paint. But I need to just draw your eye to a certain direction of paint. I need to just draw your eye towards some action and just lead you to believe it's there. Yeah, just how much to paint. Now I can paint with just 1 liter of paint and just one color. And that for me is probably the biggest achievement so far for me. Yeah. I call it Shatter, by the way. This is a really beautiful project. And again, this year I was most fortunate enough to be invited by the Pina Bausch Foundation. Any of you all know Pina Bausch? She used to be a contemporary dancer, and she's well known in the city of Wuppertal, where I've been. She'd come to Delhi and done a piece called Bamboo Blues. It is like a dance, but it's a choreographed dance. And so they had invited different artists from different parts of the world where Pina had painted. And you kind of look at the video and make a painting or something associated with it. So I had this beautiful interaction with this dancer called Pau. And I told him I really liked, that is a guy. I really liked the fact that he's in this really beautiful, large flowing gown. And I would like to paint him. So the image obviously was from their archive, and this is the first time I had to learn how to be on a lift by myself. Usually in India we're really spoiled; we have somebody doing our work, and this is not one of those lifts where you could go up and down, but you had to really come out. It's like a cherry picker. You come out and then you sort of have to. So I spend more time worrying about am I going to hit the wall? Not really about the painting, but am I going to really do this in the right manner? Also, my style is freehand, which means I just directly go by paint. And then just to show you all the mistakes I make. It's part of the process. I have a photograph, but that's just a reference. But I feel really brave enough to really tackle a large wall freehand. It's very dumb and stupid of me, but I enjoy just discovering things while I paint and what is it that I want to show with the painting. So this is why it is two more last things. Summer's Children is, I also self-publish graphic books. Apart from doing large-scale public murals, I also self-publish books. And it's not that I didn't try to find a publisher, it's just eventually it never happened. And this is a page from that book. I've bought these books so you can have a look at them. One thing I learned while doing walks on the streets is how liberating it is to try new mediums. And bookmaking is something which has become very close to me. I've published 2 books. This is my 3rd book and it's unpublished, but you get to have a look at it. I also try different mediums because it excites me. I'm always curious to find what is the most difficult point I can be, and I kind of try to swim back. It is the most happiest when I do not know what I am creating. So that's the only way I push myself forward. And with that, I must thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Anpu. It's quite inspiring, but I'll say that most of the street art people I've seen using grids. You're one very one doing it freehand. That's all. Each artist to do that. Yeah. And that one I'm going to call Santanu on. Or here? Yeah.
All right. God damn, my mic feels like I'm a musician now. That's what I get called almost all the time. Do you make music? I'm like, nah, I paint. So hi everyone, I'm Santanu Hazarika. I come from Guwahati, Assam. And I'm a self-taught artist. I am the quintessential example of an engineer turning into a creative and all that bullshit. But my thing is basically like when they reached out and said reached out, it's about the whole idea of a childhood, the whole playfulness and everything tied together. So I wanted to do like a origin story. I'm also a big comic book nerd, so for me, origin story is something that I really get inspired from, how people come from, what are the struggles like. So my thing is basically, I'm going to talk about all the things that I had experienced growing up and why do I look like this? And why do I have so many tattoos? Why my hair is like this? So basically all those stuff, and so we'll get on with it. So before all my presentations and things, I basically have this little slide, and it goes like, within infinite myths lies the eternal truth. Who sees it all? Varuna has but 1,000 eyes, Indra has 100, you and I have 2. So most of my inspirations and stuff has been my grandmother, because I've grown up listening to a lot of stories about Krishna, about gods and stuff like that. So for the longest time, I thought that these are all just like stories, like fairy tales and stuff. But as I grew older, I sort of went back to those stories and I started deciphering like a more deeper meaning to things. And this is one particular line from Devdutt Patnaik's book that really caught my eye, because as a visual artist, like we are conduits of sort of absorbing things around us, and we sort of replicate it. We add our own experiences, our own visions, and we create something completely new for the world. So where does the truth lie in? And that's what we are trying to sort of conceive and come to. Like if we do art, we take up art or design or any of this process just to fill a void. Like what's the meaning behind art? Objectively, we don't need art to survive. But why do we engage with it? Because we're trying to find that one particular meaning, that one particular truth in everything. And what we do, we call it duty, we call it art, we call it music or whatever. So this is my standpoint. Like I'm a confused child who's trying to still find that particular thing in everything that I do. So my whole life has been divided into 3 parts. It's the state, heavy metal music, and comic books. This is one of my old works. Smother Mary Alloy X24, some shit I came up with. And so I grew up listening to a lot of heavy metal music. I come from Assam, and growing up during that time, we had a huge insurgency issue. We we were under the emergency rule for the longest time, and there was always a situation we were fighting the state and also fighting the terrorists at the same time. And we are teenagers, we're kids. We didn't have any sort of place to belong to. And also we were never taught our own identity. Like for the longest time, like Assamese history is not there in our books. So we as kids, we never had anything to attach ourselves to. So we took to a stronger form of voice, which was metal music and rock, because that was the sound of rebellion that we all like associated with. So this was the situation growing up. Bunch of broke ass kids going to concerts and just like getting drunk, doing all sorts of shit, all sorts of hooliganism, vandalism, graffiti, fighting, getting in trouble with the cops. And this was my childhood in a nutshell. I don't support any of this, just saying. So this was the most kind of like the turbulent part in my life, because A, I didn't have an identity. B, the environment around me was not like enough for my growth or any of my friends' growth. Most of my friends, I've seen them either die or be in accidents or doing stupid stuff. So this was the thing, that cover that really related to me. It's like, peace sells, but who's buying? This was an old Megadeth album, and this is the first time I started identifying storytelling through visual forms. First, it was my grandmother who told me auditory forms of stories and stuff and mythologies and stuff. And then on the situation I was in, this was the visual identification that I had. This was I related to. Like this form of music, this form of rebellion was something that really drawn me closer to finding an identity through art and through visuals. So then I went on a whole journey of reading comic books, making art, getting into comic book style of inking. So my first learning process was basically copying comic book covers and creating visual language inspired from comic books. So I was collecting comic books like Spawn, Rip Claw, and all this. I would save up money, go to a second-hand bookstall to just buy like kgs of used comic books because I was broke, and I was unsupervised, left unsupervised most of the time. So I would mostly go by adult themed comic books, and I would like straight up start replicating those things. And this was the phase where I started like really like attaching myself to the color black, because everything was so vibrant, so stimulating around me. I needed some sort of depth which was completely like a void. So I started inking, and my first medium was straight up a ballpoint pen and a paper. So the longest part of my life, I've only used a ballpoint pen to draw. Then came the point where things had settled down. The whole idea of turbulence sort of was no longer there. And then there came a period where things were much more peaceful. So what do I do with that peace? Like, I've only been subjected to chaos my entire life. And how do you find an identity after that? So through that whole process of being in that turbulent situation, I developed the skill of drawing and sketching and doing like everything around visuals, everything around like a visual narration, a storytelling through just drawings and sketches. So this was the time when I started working extensively towards making album artworks, illustrations for all the local bands and my friends just to fit in. Because I was a weird kid, and nobody liked me, to be honest. And I was a misfit, and I always tried to fit in. So this was a way of getting into shows and concerts. It's like, yeah, I made the artwork and I get a free ticket for the show now. So then there came a whole time where I started making artworks, and I was doing engineering for the longest time. My parents put me into engineering. It's like, yeah, you have to become an engineer, earn money, and do the usual stuff. So, but then throughout my engineering life, I just kept sketching and drawing. So I am a mechanical engineer, and the only subjects I've ever passed were engineering drawing and machine drawing. And yeah, makes sense. Like, and actually I'm quite grateful for my time there, because that really taught me discipline in art, because which I really lacked. Like, I was a wild gun basically. I didn't care about like waking up, sketching, following rules and patterns and stuff. I'll just draw some stuff and be like, yeah, this is good. Like, this is what it is. But then when I got into engineering, I started practicing machine drawing and stuff. It taught me structure, it taught me like focus, and it taught me like patience of all, because engineering drawing, you have to like make big charts for hours and hours, and it was quite hectic. So during that time, I became quite famous as the art guy back home. I had a cult-like following. People identified my style. I started making more work for the local bands and artists. So it was a very niche community of artists. And more, like we were talking about Akib recently. So we were from the same batch, generation of people, the old school metalheads who used to like work with RSJ, Rock Street Journal, and all this other magazine. And we would make like really small things, small things, album covers and stuff like that. And while I was doing my engineering and failing in all my subjects. So if I had continued, I would probably take 8 more years to finish my degree. And finally, by final year, I was working at, those diesel shed engines, like where they fix all the engine parts for trains. So I was working there, I was fixing train parts and stuff and all that. And then finally, in like 4th year, I decided to drop out. Like, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I got diagnosed with like clinical depression and a bunch of other stuff. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do now. So I dropped out. At the same time, I took part in this Red Bull Doodle art thing that was going on year 2014-13. And one of my friends actually tagged me in that post. And I won the national round, and I went on to also win the international one. So that was my first time that actually I traveled outside the country. I got a proper contract to work with a brand, and that was the first starting point of my career. And then since then, the dropout phase, it has been a moment of a peace, a constant stability, and I straight up started making art one after the other. So I think from that point to this point, I have worked with around 130 plus brands and collaborators and artists all across the board of different genres. Practice with different mediums, starting from painting murals to making clothes, designing covers, directing music videos, like a bunch of stuff, whatever I could do, because I didn't know any other thing to do. So I started making a bunch of work. My work keeps changing, kept evolving into one form or the other. These are some of the examples of the work that I had done during that whole phase. So it's all like, you can see this, like there's a distinct style of inking, but then colors came into my life. And this was a time where colors were like, oh, it's supposed to make you happy. I'm like, no, it made my life hell. Like I hated it. So I was experimenting with a lot of colorful stuff. Then again went back to making black stuff. So these are like acrylic pieces made with these are big pieces. These are like 10 feet, 15 feet, 15 by 10 feet. These are the sizes of this work. So again, started painting all this. These are some of the examples of work that I've done. This again ink. So I again went back to my formal, formal practice of using just pens for my work. So these are some of the other examples. Then finally there came a point where I'm like, I am just still not there yet. I was like really unsatisfied with everything that I did. And all this exploration, all of these things, it just like felt really futile. And I felt like, okay, I need to rediscover a lot of things. Maybe if my approach is wrong with art, if my approach with my medium is wrong, then this thing like completely like caught my whole attention. Is like, my, those eyes like fire, I'm a winged insect, you're a funeral pyre. So the thing is, I realized that it was not about me, because everything that I've been doing was me. I'm making this, I'm going through these experiences, I want to make this, I want to be this and all that. But I realized that like there is a huge lag between what I make and what my medium is. My understanding of medium completely shifted, and I realized that I am the medium. It's not that I'm practicing with a medium. Everything that I'm making, I'm absorbing and I'm putting it out there in different forms. We put such a strong emphasis on medium being a physical thing. Like I practice with acrylic on canvas, I practice with ink on paper, digital, analog, that we completely forget the fact that you yourself is a medium, and then every medium needs a point of creation and a point of destruction. So this is where I realized that for me to completely immerse myself, I have to completely change this idea and shift that idea of that medium as a separate entity from who you are to making yourself the medium of what you make. And then followed the whole process of rebirth. I started a whole different process. See, all these works that I've done over the last few years never had me in them. It was always the world around me, things that I observed, things that I saw. Then came a phase where I started putting myself in the work, where I'm going to immerse myself in the artworks that I make. So this was the phase of the whole rebirth thing, where I started making self-portraits and putting myself in different scapes of different artworks that I created. Again, I went back to my grandmother's theory of storytelling through myths. So I rediscovered myself. That's why I consider it as the rebirth. So this is the whole narration, is a three-part artwork that I had done. First is me being there with a pet snake, and there is like the whole idea of creation, that being a vagina with an eye. That's where we come from. So it's a process of regression. Like I want to regress back to the womb. I want to go back. I want to like reinvent myself. But then there were so many things that would not let me to go back to where I was, because A, I'm older, B, I've gone through a bunch of experiences, and I'm human. So everything that is human and that stops me from being who I am is kind of represented by the red leash that you see over there. That just holds me back from creating and reinventing myself. And I'm just sad, and I'm trying to understand what to do. The next phase is basically the pet snake who's always there, slithering as a pet. That's the self-doubt, that's everything that kind of creeps, like your imposter syndrome or whatever you face as an artist, is that snake that you keep as a pet. And you always don't mind about it, you don't think about it. But then the snake consumes you. That very thing that you consider as very minuscule or doesn't exist becomes the most largest part of your life. And there is the whole idea of killing yourself. So the same noose that was there, that was holding me back, becomes the same thing that sort of is the reason for my death. And then the snake itself becomes like a godlike deity. All your insecurities, all your shortcomings and everything becomes a godly figure. And that rips you apart from everything. Like, that's my heart over there. That's the flower, the ornamental rebirth process, which is here. That's the yarn made from the nerves that I have. And again, there's a dagger made with all the rings and stones that my mom makes me wear. And so the whole idea of this is basically the mythological storytelling that my grandmom used to tell me. All the religious pictures that you see, everything has a meaning. So this was the process of me telling a story that got inspired from my grandmother. But it's kind of dark, I get it. It's kind of a little moody and all that, but this kind of makes me happy. And then this whole process of transformation continues for the rebirth. And then you have the final rebirth. So the idea of a god and the pet snake is based on a very false, it's not concrete, it's not the truth. So the very god that was the reptile sort of used the same ornaments that were there to end the cycle. To end the cycle of constantly trying to find out the process of birth and rebirth. And then you have a child coming out of his mouth. And that's who I am at this point. I'm still holding the same heart. I'm still holding the same yarn made of my nerves. And I'm born around the whole, in the reality of physical reality, basically. And this is a transformative process that I'm going through. And this is the next phase. So everything that I have been doing and creating over this last few years has been around the idea of regression, going back to how I started off, what I was doing and what I was creating. And just like how a reptile sheds its skin and goes through the molting process, my soul and my idea of who I am, what art is constantly changing. And yeah, these are some of the works that I've been practicing ever since that whole rebirth process happened. Again, going back to the roots of using only black and white, and maybe a hint of red here and there, and then using ink as a medium again. Yep, and this is the last piece from the series that I had done. And yep, that's all of the origin story and the artwork and the current state I'm in terms of art and how I see art and overall the whole process of making art. Thank you.